Hi guys, welcome back to CRYPTID'S Den. I'm so glad you're here. Seriously. It's always a good time when we get to hang out and dive into some strange, fascinating stuff together. Whether you're a believer, a skeptic, or just here for the ride, you're welcome. Tell me where you're watching from and what you think. Don't be shy. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and jump into the comments. I love hearing from you. Now, let's get into it. I saved a creature that doesn't exist. And somehow, it healed me. Have you ever heard a scream in the woods that didn't sound human? Or animal? That night in Bitterroot? I did. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't a wolf. It was something raw, aching, desperate. When I followed the sound, I found something I still can't explain. A massive stone python coiled around a frail, hairy, human-shaped creature. Dying. A teenage Bigfoot. I didn't hesitate. I used my shock device, forced the serpent to release. And when the boy looked at me, I knew I hadn't just saved a creature. I had stepped into a different world. My name is Harper Rains. I'm 30, a former Army vet, now a park ranger, hiding in the cold fog of Montana's wilderness, trying to forget the brother I couldn't save. But that night, everything changed. I named him Ash. He didn't growl, didn't speak. He watched, he remembered. The scars on his body told stories of cages, scalpels, and silence. I wasn't just treating wounds. I was unlearning fear from both of us. This video will show you what really happened. How one silent boy from the woods helped me face the truth about my past. About my brother. About who the real monsters are. And if you think Bigfoot is just a legend, I beg you, don't look away. Because what I saw wasn't a myth. It was memory. And some memories don't let you go. It started with a sound. Not a voice. Not a warning. Just a sound. A low, grinding static came through my radio. One of those old Motorola long-range beasts we used on the ridge patrols. Then, layered beneath it, a roar. Not the kind that echoes and dies out. No, this one stuck, like it clawed into the trees and refused to let go. I was about 2 miles north of the station, patrolling near the edge of what we called the Black Pines. Officially, it's Area C off-limits, even for us rangers. It's not on the tourist maps, and the trails that lead in there, well, they have been maintained since the 80s. Not because of budget, because no one wants to go in there. Locals call it the place where the trees don't breathe. I paused, hand on the radio, waiting. Static, then silence, then again, that scream. Not a wolf, not a bear. Nothing I'd heard in 17 years of working this job. It was low, almost guttural at first, like something massive was in pain, fighting, maybe even dying. I didn't say a word. I just reached for my gear and started walking. The pine needles swallowed my footsteps. That's the thing about Montana forests at night. They're never quiet. But sometimes they pretend to be. And when they do, it's worse than any storm. I had my tranquilizer rifle slung over one shoulder, flashlight in hand, and a portable tracking unit on my belt. I hadn't expected anything unusual tonight. Just the usual trail cams, maybe a lost elk. But now, everything in me was humming with something I didn't have a name for. The further I went, the thicker the mist curled around the base of the trees. It wasn't fog from the cold. It was something else, heavier, like it clung to your legs, tried to push you back. I ignored it, kept going. About half a mile in, I saw the first set of tracks, long, wide, deeper than they should have been, like whatever made them weigh twice as much as a grizzly. The stride length was all wrong, too far apart. And the claw marks, they weren't just impressions. They dug into the frozen earth, split tree bark in jagged arcs, as if something had been running, or hunting. Then there was the blood, dark, thick, dried at the edges but still damp in the middle, smeared across a granite outcrop like someone, or something, had been thrown against it. It wasn't red. It was blackish brown, with a smell I can put into words, like rust and wet fur and something older than any animal I'd ever handled. That's when I started hearing it. A sound like someone breathing through their teeth. Long, strained inhales. Short, choking exhales. It was coming from deeper in, past a cluster of dead pines twisted together like broken fingers. I shouldn't have gone. Every part of me said turn back. But I stepped forward. The mist thickened. My flashlight barely pierced 5 feet ahead. The breathing grew louder. Faster. Then, another sound. A hiss. Low. Deep. Wrong. And then I saw it. There, in a shallow, rock-lined gully, something was moving. Big, muscular, coiled around something else. Its scales caught the light just enough for me to make out the pattern. Dull green and mottled brown, thick as a tree trunk. Its body shifted, tightening around a figure that twitched beneath it, limbs flailing in slow, exhausted bursts. At first I thought it was a man, then maybe a bear cub. But it wasn't either. Its body was too long, too lean, covered in matted fur, but with arms and legs that bent like ours. One arm reached out, fingers splayed. The hand was massive, with dark, cracked nails. The face was half buried in the mud. But then it turned, just enough, staring right at me. And then it made a sound I'll never forget. Not a growl, not a scream. A plea, the python. Because that's what it was, a damn python, here in Montana. Let out a sharp growl, like a warning. Then it began to squeeze. I heard bones shift, crack. The thing beneath it, this creature, twitched harder. Its mouth opened in a silent scream. Blood bubbled at its lips. I didn't think. I just acted. I yanked the stun gun from my belt and fired. The electric burst arced across the snake's body, lighting the mist in a harsh white flash. It recoiled slightly, enough for the creature to suck in a breath. But then, the python turned. It didn't retreat. It came for me, fast. It coiled upward, head lunging, body whipping through the fog like a whip through water. I stumbled back, lost footing, and it caught me. My ankle, tight. Burning pain shot up my leg. I went down hard, mud in my mouth, my flashlight spinning into the dark. And that's when I came face to face with it. The creature. It lay inches from me, pinned but alive, eyes locked on mine. No growl, no flinch. Just trust, like it knew I was its only shot. The snake's weight shifted. My ribs compressed. I couldn't breathe. My hands scrambled in the mud, found the stun gun again. One more shot. I didn't aim. I just pressed it into flesh and fired. The scream that came from that snake wasn't from pain. It was rage. It uncoiled in a violent spasm, flinging both me and the creature sideways. I hit a tree. Hard. Something cracked in my shoulder. But I didn't care. I rolled onto my knees, looked around. The snake was gone. Vanished into the trees like a nightmare that didn't want daylight. I turned to the creature, still breathing. Barely. It tried to rise. Failed, then tried again, and sat up. Blood matted the fur around its ribs. But it looked at me. Really looked. And I swear, something passed between us. Not words, not fear. Something else. Something almost human. But before I could speak, before I could even blink, something cracked in the forest behind me. Not a branch, a tree. And I knew then we went alone. It didn't move right away. The creature just sat there in the mud, its chest rising in these raw, uneven gasps, like breathing hurt, like every inhale reminded it of something it had survived but didn't escape. My leg still throbbed from where that monster of a snake had yanked me down, and the stun gun was nearly out of charge. But none of that mattered, not when I was staring straight into the face of something I didn't even believe could exist until 5 minutes ago. It looked almost human. That's the part that wrecked me the most. It had fur, yeah, dark, tangled and wet with blood. But under that mess were features too familiar. A nose that looked broken more than once, lips cracked and bleeding, and those eyes, bloodshot, glossy, red around the rims like it'd been crying, or maybe it never stopped. It shifted again, struggling. Tried to get up on one elbow. That's when I saw the shoulder, dislocated maybe. It looked like it'd been through hell before the snake ever got to it. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't a man. It was something caught between. The python's rustling hadn't stopped. I could hear it sliding off through the brush somewhere behind me, slow and heavy, like it wasn't finished, like it knew I'd messed up its meal, and maybe it was thinking about coming back to collect a new one. The air went still, too still. No frogs, no wind, not even the damn mosquitoes. Just the wet sound of this creature coughing, trying to sit up while its ribs made this awful cracking noise. And me, frozen like a rookie on her first night in the woods. I should have called for backup, but I didn't. I stepped closer. Its head tilted, just barely. Its eyes tracked me like it was bracing for a hit, like maybe the worst pain it felt wasn't even from the snake. And then its arm moved, not in defense, not to strike. It reached out, toward me, palm open. It was trembling. I swear I forgot how to breathe. I knelt slowly, watching its fingers stretch like it was trying to say something without a voice, and I heard the hiss again, closer, to the right. The snake wasn't gone. It wasn't retreating. It was circling back. And in that 1 second, everything in me went cold. Not fear. Instinct. That raw, screaming part of your brain that yells move or die. I twisted, raised the stun gun. Nothing. Dead. The light flickered once and died in my hand. And then came the sound. The rush of scales over pine needles. That impossible weight slithering fast through the mist. And before I could react, it was back. Coils snapping out from the fog like living whips. I screamed and fired anyway. No charge, just the click of desperation. It coiled my leg again, tighter this time, yanked me straight off the ground. I hit the mud hard, my mouth filled with it, my ribs crushed against a rock. I clawed for something, anything, but the snake was dragging me toward the dark, and I couldn't even scream. That's when it happened. The creature moved, fast, faster than I thought it could. It launched toward me. Not away, not into the woods, but toward me, toward the thing dragging me. And it screamed, a sound so full of pain and fury and something ancient that I felt it in my spine, like thunder inside my bones. It lunged for the snake, grabbed a coil with both hands and bit down. Bit. Its jaw cracked sideways, like it wasn't made to move that way. Blood sprayed from somewhere. I don't know if it was his or the snake's. But that thing let go of me for just long enough that I rolled out of its grip and scrambled backward. The creature was still clinging to it, teeth buried in scale, claws sunk deep, even as the snake thrashed. I grabbed a branch, something thick, swung hard, over and over, until the coils went limp. And then everything stopped. Silence again, but not peaceful. This heavy, buzzing kind of silence, where your ears ring and your hands won't stop shaking. The creature lay in the mud, motionless, barely breathing. I crawled to it. My fingers brushed its shoulder, flinched. It didn't move. I reached again, slower. This time I touched just beneath the fur, warm, alive. I whispered, "It's okay. You're safe." I don't know why I said that. It wasn't true. Nothing about this was safe. But it blinked once, eyes heavy, then slumped against me. And for the first time in my life, I found myself holding something I'd only ever heard whispered about in late-night ranger stories and half-drunk campfire warnings. Bigfoot. Not a beast, not a monster. Something more. Something broken. Something real. I stayed there for a long time, just breathing, listening, watching the mist thicken around us. The weight of what I'd seen pressing down like the sky had gotten heavier. I didn't know what to do next. I just knew I couldn't leave it here. Not like this. Not after it saved me. I shifted closer, checking its injuries. That shoulder was definitely out. One leg may be fractured. There were old scars, too. Faded ones. Burns. Cuts. A jagged line across its neck like someone once tried to collar it. And suddenly I didn't care where it came from. I cared what had been done to it. I reached for my belt, pulled the emergency flare, just in case I needed to call evac later. Then I took off my jacket, draped it over its chest. It shivered. Something soft left its mouth. Not a word, just a sound. Low, raspy, like the tail end of a breath trying to form a memory. And then, in the distance, movement, a figure, tall, still, watching. I turned my flashlight slowly. There, through the mist, stood a shadow, upright, massive, then another, and another. They didn't move, didn't blink, just stood between the trees, silhouettes carved from stone. I froze. The creature beside me, Ash, I'd call him later, didn't flinch. He just looked. Watched them. Then, one of them, taller than the rest, stepped forward. He lifted his chin, barely, just a nod, and vanished. Like smoke into fog, they were gone. Just like that, I stared into the trees long after they disappeared. My breath caught somewhere between awe and terror. I didn't know if they were warning me or thanking me. But Ash didn't run. He stayed. And in that moment, so did I, because whatever this was, it wasn't over. He didn't run. Even after everything, the python, the blood, the way his body had been crushed and broken. He sat up, not fast, not defiant, slow, like someone waking from a nightmare and realizing they're still inside it. The way his shoulders move. God, he was in pain. I could feel it just watching him try to sit. But he didn't look away from me. His eyes stayed locked on mine. No growl, no noise. Just a stare. Human in all the ways it shouldn't have been. That moment stretched longer than it had any right to. The air was damp, thick with pine resin, and smoke from the flare I'd dropped. Somewhere behind me, a bird called once, sharp and high. Then silence again. He didn't blink. I didn't either. Then slowly, he lifted one arm and pressed a hand flat against his chest. Not dramatic, not forced. Just a simple gesture like a vow or a memory. It felt like he was saying something I couldn't understand yet. But I felt it. Then came the sound. Branches shifting. Not snapping, not crashing. Just that quiet pressure of something big moving through the woods. Too careful for clumsiness. I turned my head toward the sound and raised my flashlight. The beam cut through the mist like a blade, shaky in my hand. The trees ahead were shrouded in fog so thick it looked painted on. Then something moved inside it. Not one thing. Not two. 7. 7. 7. At first I thought they were trees. That's how still they were. Like shadows etched into the forest itself. But their shapes weren't natural. Shoulders too broad. Heads tilted ever so slightly. Watching. None of them stepped forward. None called out. No movement at all. And then I realized Every single one of them was staring at Chim-Hee. He didn't move, but his breathing changed. Shallower, a little faster, like he was holding something back. I whispered, not sure why. Are they your people? He didn't answer. Not with words, but he didn't try to run. He didn't even stand. He just sat there, body still bruised and half-folded, looking at them the way a lost child looks at the house they were taken from. I slowly rose to my feet, mud and pine needles sticking to my legs. My side screamed from the fall earlier, but I didn't care. My light swept across them again. That's when I saw the largest of them all. 9 feet tall, maybe more. Shoulders like a boulder. Fur darker than the rest. His head was slightly lowered, but I could still feel his eyes on me. He took 1 step forward. I didn't move. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought I'd crack. And then he nodded, just once. Subtle, control, and in the blink of a breath, gone. All of them, one by one, they slipped back into the trees like ghosts sinking into mist. No sound, no farewell. Just gone. I turned back toward him. He was still sitting, eyes tracking the last place they stood. And in that moment, I felt something click into place. Something I didn't have words for. They hadn't left him. They'd come to see, to judge, to wait. Not for him, for me. I knelt beside him again, slower this time. My hand hovered near his arm, not touching. They didn't abandon you, I whispered. They were watching to see what I would do. He turned his head slightly, just enough to meet my eyes again, and that was it. No growl, no threat, no retreat. He stayed. I stayed. We sat there together in that freezing silence, surrounded by pine and mud and the ghostly remains of something ancient. The flashlight flickered once, then died completely. I didn't bother turning on another. The moonlight had finally broken through the mist, pale and thin, but enough to see his breath fog in the cold air. He was still alive, still hurting, but not alone. I leaned back against the base of a tree, the bark biting into my spine, and let myself breathe again. The tremors in my hands hadn't stopped. I don't think they did for hours, but I didn't feel scared anymore, not the way I had before. I looked at him one more time before I let my eyes close, and for a second, just a second, I could have sworn he was watching me the same way, like we both didn't know what we were anymore. But somehow, we weren't what we used to be either. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Couldn't have been minutes, couldn't have been a whole hour. But when I opened my eyes again, the mist was pulling back. The trees were visible, and the night didn't feel so dense. He hadn't moved, but his breathing had slowed, more even now. I reached into my pocket, slowly, and pulled out a ration bar. I unwrapped it, broke it in half, and laid it on the ground between us. He didn't touch it. Not then. But his eyes followed the motion. That was enough. We weren't out of the woods. But something had shifted, and deep down I think we both knew. Whatever came next, we'd already crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and something was still watching us. Not from the trees, not anymore, from within. I didn't sleep. I closed my eyes a few times that night, but sleep? No, I couldn't. Not with everything I'd just seen. Not with him lying a few feet from me, half-conscious and shaking in his own skin. The sky stayed that dark, ink blue-gray. The kind that holds the stars back like it knows they'd only make things feel more unreal. By morning, the mist had lifted just enough to show me where we were. I knew this part of the ridge, southeast of Firewatch Station Echo. Maybe 2 miles down a slope that hadn't been maintained since before I was even stationed here. The old service cabin, half collapsed, partly hidden under an outcrop of stone, sat like a memory someone didn't want to forget or forgive. I brought him there. He didn't want to go in, I saw it in his eyes before I even reached the porch. His breath hitched, shoulders locked, like every part of his body was screaming no while his legs still followed mine out of instinct. Or trust. Or maybe just exhaustion. But the moment I opened that creaking cabin door, he stopped. Not just hesitated, he froze. I turned, ready to coax him in, but he was already backing up. Not fast. Just slow, deliberate, each step like it cost him. His head shook once. No, it wasn't me he was afraid of. It was inside it. That was enough for me. I didn't ask. I didn't argue. I left the cabin open, but I grabbed the tarp and some old thermal blankets from inside and started building a little camp right there on the porch. Right in the middle of everything. Pine needles, firewood, my busted shoulder, his broken ribs. We made our own kind of shelter. He let me wrap him in the blanket. Didn't fight when I laid the second one down beneath him. I started a fire, low and careful. The kind that doesn't draw attention. The kind that gives you light and heat but not safety. Nothing really felt safe. I sat beside him with my knees pulled up, the pain in my ribs flaring every time I moved wrong. He wouldn't take his eyes off the cabin. Not once. He wasn't blinking much either. I thought maybe he was drifting in and out, but then his breathing changed again. Not fast this time, hollow. Like he was somewhere else entirely. I reached out, slow again, this time toward his neck, where the bruising looked worst. I needed to check the damage. See if anything vital was hit. But the second my fingers brushed near his throat, he screamed. Not loud. Just broken. A short, strangled sound that clawed its way out of his chest like it didn't want to be heard. Then, he backed up so fast he hit the porch railing. Almost fell over it. Arms shaking. Eyes wide. That wasn't pain. That was fear. I held up my hands. Okay, I said gently. Okay, I won't touch it. He didn't move for a while. Just stared at me, like he wasn't sure if I was going to turn on him too. I stayed still. Eventually, he lowered his hands. That's when I saw it, just below the fur on his throat. There was something. A scar. Thick, raised, ugly, too clean to be natural. The kind of scar that says someone had a plan when they put it there. And I knew in my gut he hadn't always been out here in the trees. Someone had taken him, used him, and whatever they did left more than just marks on his body. The sun never broke through the clouds that day. I lit the red lantern, the one we use for wildlife rehab. Softer light. Doesn't overstimulate. I placed it beside him, set a jug of water just close enough for him to reach without pressure. Then I stepped back. That's when he started to move his hand in the dirt. Slow at first. Fingers shaky. Then more deliberate. He drew a shape, then another. A square with bars. A figure inside it. Another figure beside it. I didn't need a translator. I knew what it meant. He had been caged. He had been watched. He had been hurt. My throat clenched so tight I thought I was going to be sick. I dropped to my knees beside the drawing. Looked at it, then reached down and wiped it away with the side of my hand. He flinched when I did it. But I didn't do it to erase him. I did it to free him. No more cages, I whispered. Not here. Not with me. He looked up. Something flickered in his eyes. A hesitation, like part of him didn't believe me yet. But part of him wanted. That night, I didn't light another fire. Too risky. But I stayed awake, sitting cross-legged in the dark, watching over him as he slept under the edge of the roof. His breathing was shallow but steady. His body curled tight like something that learned not to take up space. Like sleep wasn't something he trusted. I wrapped the last thermal blanket around him, careful not to wake him, and then I sat there, listening, not to the wind, not to the night birds. To him. To every breath he took and every twitch that said maybe, just maybe, he was starting to believe he was safe. I'd seen what fear looked like. I'd seen what survival did to something wild, But this wasn't just about wilderness. This was about cruelty. This was about something that had taken something sacred and tried to break it down into pieces small enough to study, to tame, to own. And now that sacred thing was lying outside my cabin, bruised and shivering and still holding on. And it trusted me, even if it didn't want to. I looked out past the trees into the pitch-black horizon, and I felt it. The stillness, that heavy silence that says the forest is holding its breath, waiting, watching. And somewhere out there, I swear, something else was listening too. But it wasn't ready to show its face yet. Not yet. The forest always has a way of going quiet before something bad happens. It's not the kind of quiet that gives you peace. It's the kind that tightens around your chest like a wire. That morning, I felt it before I heard them. Boots, crunching through the brush like they didn't give a damn who heard them coming. That kind of confidence always comes with loaded weapons and something to prove. 3 men. Hunters. At least that's what they looked like on the surface, but their camo was too clean, their gear too expensive. One of them had a scope that looked military grade. Another wore a radio earpiece like he was still reporting to someone off-grid. And then there was the third. Tall, broad-shouldered, and moving like someone used to giving orders. I recognized him before he even spoke. Logan Grant. We served together overseas. That's a name I haven't said out loud in a long time, and I still don't say it easy. He'd vanished from the field not long before I left the Army. Rumors said he went private, quiet ops, black bag contracts. I'd hoped I'd never run into him again, but there he was, smirking like time owed him something. Harper Hale, he said, like he was tasting the name. Didn't expect to find you out here in the boonies. Thought you were hiding from your past. I kept my stance relaxed, hand near my belt, but not on my weapon. Not yet. Just trying to keep the wildlife safe. Logan chuckled, glanced at the woods behind me. Funny. That's exactly why we're here. The guy to his left, big, probably ex-Marine, had a rifle slung over his shoulder and a thermal scanner in hand. I could hear it ticking softly as it swept the trees. They weren't here for deer. They were tracking something warm, something big. I had to fight to keep my face still. We got some chatter on the ham bands last night, Logan continued. Something about a scream in the pines. That come from your end. I shrugged. Could have been anything. Coyotes, elk in heat. Radio picks up weird things in these hills. He squinted at me. The way people do when they know you're lying but can't quite prove it yet. You've always been a shitty liar, Hale. The scanner guy tilted his head. Got prints out back. Big ones. My pulse jumped. I turned slightly, blocking their line of sight with my shoulder. This is restricted land. Research zone. You're not authorized to be here, Logan smiled again. But it didn't reach his eyes. And yet, here you, I'm Ranger certified. You're not. He took a slow step toward me, boots sinking just a little in the moss. Let's not play games. We know what's out here. There is a price tag on it, and someone's gonna collect. That's when I knew this wasn't some bored team of hobby hunters. This was a contract tag, a bounty. They weren't here to discover, they were here to kill. I did what I had to do. I nodded toward the West Ridge. You might try down that way. Saw something large moving before sunrise. Could have been a bear. The scanner guy was already turning. Logan held my stare for a few more seconds. Then he saw it. He looked at my wrist, just a flicker of movement. But enough. The scar, a burn mark I got from a mission gone wrong years ago. No one else had one like it, and he remembered. His eyes narrowed. He stepped in close. Closer than I wanted him. Close enough to smell the iron on his breath. If you're hiding something, Harper, and I find out it's what we think it is, you'll be in that cage right next to it. I didn't flinch. He stepped back, nodded once to his men. They headed west, rifles up. When I was sure they were gone, I ran. The kind of run that slices through your lungs and keeps going. I didn't go to the cave. That would have led them straight to him. Instead, I circled the ridge, made a few deliberate tracks toward a false den, dropped scraps of fur he'd collected from his bandages. Just enough to look real. By the time I got back to camp, my legs were shaking. Ash was already away. I don't know if he ever truly sleeps. He was crouched near the stone edge of the porch, body tense, eyes alert. He'd heard everything. I knelt in front of him, breath still shallow. "They're here," I said. "People who want stop." His chest rose and fell. He didn't need to answer. Then he did something I didn't expect. He reached into the dirt and placed a small, round stone in my palm. Smooth, almost warm, not special by the look of it, but the way he did it, gentle, deliberate, it felt like more than just a rock. I'd studied primates long enough to know what it meant. In his world, that was trust, a gift. I closed my fingers around it and nodded. We didn't speak the same language, but in that moment we understood each other more than anyone else ever had. And I realized something. He didn't trust easily, which meant neither should I. They came just before sunset, when the air starts to hum and the woods lose their colors. That soft golden edge of light slipping behind the trees, stretching shadows into something colder than night. I just finished boiling water, the fire low, the kind of orange that flickers like breath. Ash was curled near the stone edge of the porch again, still too cautious to go near the cabin, but close enough to watch the tree line. He always watched the trees, like he knew what was coming before I did. I didn't hear them approach, not at first, but the birds did. They scattered fast, silent, like they'd rehearsed this scene before. I stood up, gun in hand, no chambered round yet, but my fingers rested on the bolt. I didn't want to believe they'd come back so soon. I thought I had more time to move him, to get ahead of them. I was wrong. Footsteps, several. I stepped forward, one boot on the first stair of the porch, and I saw them break through the trees. Logan was in front, gun resting across his chest. He didn't look rushed. He looked sure. Behind him were the other two, and a fourth now, younger, twitchy. His rifle was up already, sweeping back and forth, like he wanted something to twitch so he had an excuse. I didn't speak. I didn't blink. Logan raised a hand like we were just continuing a conversation. "You've been busy," he said. I kept my body between them and Ash. I could feel him shift behind me, hear the low click of his claws tightening on the wood. "You're trespassing," I said flatly. Logan grinned. "And you're lying." He stepped up the path like he owned it. "I gave you a chance, Harper. I really did. But you went soft. Whatever's out here, it's not yours to protect." I stepped down from the porch, right into the path, rifle lowered but firm. "That thing," he nodded toward the dark behind me, "killed a man last spring, did you know that?" I didn't answer. He shrugged. "You think it's special, but you don't know what it's done, what it's capable of." "You don't either," I said. Made him pause. Then he signaled. The younger one moved left. The big guy went right. They were flanking me fast. Before I could think, the one on the left broke into a sprint. And that's when I turned and screamed, "Run!" Ash bolted. He moved faster than I thought he could. The porch cracked under his weight as he leapt off the side and vanished into the trees, deeper into the ridge where the fog always stays thick and the land folds in on itself like it's hiding something. They didn't hesitate. Logan shouted something. I didn't catch it, and the younger one was already chasing him through the trees. "Gun up." I ran after them, cutting hard through brush, branches slapping my face, thorns tearing at my sleeves. The scanner guy was ahead of me, almost caught up to Ash. Then something changed. The light dimmed, not because of the sun, because the fog came down, fast, thick. It poured over the ridge like it'd been waiting, like something had called it. I couldn't see 10 feet ahead. I heard one of the men curse, then a sharp cry, then silence. 1, 2. Gone? The third man screamed, short, sharp, and then the sound of a body hitting wet earth, then nothing, just the wind. The kind of wind that sounds like breath, real close to your ear. I spun, heart hammering. I couldn't see a damn thing. Then I felt it, a hand. Not rough, not grabbing, just a firm, heavy palm against the back of my head, lowering me gently. Fingers brushed the gag from my mouth. I hadn't even realized I'd been tied. When had they then touched my shoulder? I turned. It was him, the elder one, the same figure I saw that night in the pines. His fur was thick, darker than ash, streaked with gray. His eyes were deep set, amber glowing through the mist. He didn't speak, but he didn't need to. He looked at me like he'd been watching since before I was born, like he saw everything. Then he raised 2 fingers and placed them against my forehead, just held them there. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a ritual. It wasn't a ritual. It was something else. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, not from fear, from the unknowing, like my body understood before my mind did. He saw me, all of me, and still he let me live. He pulled his hand back and was gone. The fog followed, like it obeyed him. When I came back to myself, I dropped to my knees. The air felt new, like something had shifted. Ash appeared moments later, bruised but not bleeding, breathing hard. He didn't speak, but his eyes met mine, and I saw something in them that hadn't been there before. Relief. Not just that he was alive, but that I was his. We walked back to the cabin in silence. The bodies were gone. No blood, no prints, like the forest had swallowed them whole. And maybe it had. Back at camp, Ash sat across from me. He pulled his knees to his chest like a child and stared into the dying fire. I didn't speak. I just reached for the smooth stone he'd given me before, held it tight in my palm, and for the first time in a long, long time, I cried. He led me without a sound. No gesture, no words, just a glance into the trees, then a slow, steady walk. Wounded leg dragging slightly, but never breaking pace. I didn't ask where we were going. I didn't need to. Something in the way his body moved told me this wasn't random. This wasn't instinct. It was memory. The sun never rose fully that morning. Just a dull gray glow bleeding through the fog, enough to keep the shadows company, but not enough to chase them off. We hiked uphill for what felt like an hour, maybe 2. My legs burned. My shoulder throbbed with every step, but I didn't slow down. I followed. The path narrowed near the top, dense pines, moss swallowing old roots and rock. There was no trail, no markers, just the way the trees bent back ever so slightly, like they remembered him, like they'd moved for him before. And then we saw it, tucked against the cliff face, behind a curtain of tangled brush and deadfall, was the shape of something man-made. The wood was black with time. Rust peeled from the corners of what used to be a steel door, hinges bent and broken. The roof had mostly collapsed inward, but the walls still stood. A cabin, but not like mine. This wasn't shelter. This was containment. Ash stopped at the edge of the clearing. He didn't step closer. Didn't need to. I did. I crossed the space between us and the doorway, pushed aside a branch, and looked inside. The air was colder, still, like nothing alive had breathed in here for years. The first thing I saw was a metal table bolted to the floor. Restraints rusted in place. A chain looped through a hole in the center. The floor was stained dark in wide, overlapping patterns. Blood, old but not gone. In the corner, boxes, toppled filing cabinets, stacks of photos pinned into the walls with warped nails, faces, not human, Bigfoot, or what we called Bigfoot, in cages, some alive, some not. I moved in slowly, careful not to step on the broken glass near the far side of the room. A portable generator, long dead, sat like a corpse against the wall. Next to it was a desk, papers, notes, audio tapes labeled in black marker. I froze when I saw the handwriting. I knew it. I'd seen it on birthday cards and postcards from college and that old sticky note taped to my fridge even after I left everything behind. It was my brother's. I sat down. I didn't mean to. My legs just gave out. He'd worked here. He was part of this. That was why he came to Montana. Why he disappeared. Why no one ever got a clear answer when he stopped answering calls. He never left. He was swallowed by this. I opened the top drawer. More photos? One of them, I couldn't breathe. Ash, younger, smaller, chained to a wall, eyes swollen, mouth open in some silent scream, fur matted with blood and mud. A tag looped around one wrist like an animal in a lab. Unit 7A. My hands shook. Ash stepped inside then. Quiet, heavy. He came up beside me and looked at the photo in my hand. He didn't snatch it away, didn't growl. He just watched, and then he reached down and touched my shoulder, lightly. I don't know if it was to comfort me or to tell me he remembered too. Maybe both. I couldn't stay in that chair. I stood, knocked over a tape recorder, and it skittered across the floor. Without thinking, I picked it up, clicked play. It buzzed. Then it clicked. Then came the sound of a voice, human voice, younger, trembling, crying. Please, just call me back. Please, Matt. I don't know what happened to you. If it was something I said or something I missed, but it'd been 3 days. You wouldn't just vanish. I don't believe that. I know something's wrong. I can feel it in my chest. Just, please, come home. The tape ended. The room spun. I hadn't heard that message since the day I left Denver. Since I packed up the apartment, quit the job, and drove out here, thinking I'd start over. That something inside me was unfinished. That maybe if I got far enough from the noise, I could hear what was left. I didn't know I was following his trail. I didn't know I was stepping into his grave. Ash backed up, pointed toward the corner where an old oil drum sat, half full of mold and broken glass. I didn't hesitate. I gathered the papers, the photos, every tape, every folder. I poured them into the drum, struck a match, dropped it in. The fire didn't roar. It just hissed, like the building itself was exhaling. Ash stood beside me the whole time, eyes reflecting the flames. The smoke curled upward into the open beams, catching on the ceiling like breath held too long. It smelled like history, like chemicals and regret and something ancient being unmade. I turned to him. He looked at me. Then, for the first time, he stepped forward, not cautious, not flinching, and wrapped his arms around me, gently, like he'd done it before, like he remembered what it was to be held. My breath caught in my chest. I didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, inside the ruins of a nightmare, and let myself be small. He held me until the fire burned low, until the roof beams creaked like they were ready to fall, until the ashes drifted in the air like snow. Then we left it behind, and neither of us looked back. The ridge caught fire with sunlight that morning. That slow, golden kind that doesn't rush the trees. It just lingers, like it knows the forest has stories it not done telling. I sat on the porch of the cabin, boots muddy, throat raw, eyes swollen from a night I barely remembered. Ash stood at the edge of the clearing, right where the trail disappears into the deep. He wasn't fidgeting. He wasn't waiting. He was choosing. I already knew what the choice was. I just didn't want to say it out loud. Saying it would have made it real. Saying it would have meant this moment, this stillness, wasn't going to last. I didn't want to speak. Not yet. So I just sat there, letting the silence stretch, letting it drape over us like a soft old blanket that still smelled like smoke and pine and sweat. Ash turned his head toward me then, not fast, not hesitant, just that quiet, knowing way he always had, and in his hands, He held something I hadn't expected. A bundle, wrapped in rough bark fiber, tied at the edges with twine made from vine. He stepped closer. I rose without thinking, boots crunching the frost that still clung to the earth beneath the shade. We stood face to face. His fur was matted in places, healed in others. Eyes still tired but clearer now. The kind of clear you only get after grief has passed through you like a storm. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out a small cloth, my offering. It wasn't much, but it had meaning. A triangle had torn from an old ranger bandana. The edge was stained with my blood from when the trappers caught me, ash blackened from the lab we burned, and tied with a little pine sprig I'd kept from the first night we'd made camp. One for pain, one for memory, one for protection. I didn't say what it meant, but I think he knew. I held it out. He took it slow and gentle, his thick fingers brushing my hand in a way that wasn't clumsy anymore. He studied the cloth, turned it once, then tucked it carefully beneath the strap across his shoulder. He didn't say goodbye, but he did step forward, and for the first time, he made a sound. It wasn't a growl. It wasn't a cry. It was small, barely more than breath, like a sigh caught in a broken voice box. But it was sound, and it was meant for me. Then he leaned down and pressed his forehead to mine. The weight of him, the warmth, the steady hum of something ancient and alive pulsing through that moment like a heartbeat wrapped around mine. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them again, he was walking straight into the trees. The sun caught on the tips of his fur, that same warmth that lit the mountain. That same gold I'd seen 1,000 times but never noticed until he stepped into it. I watched him move like a shadow swallowed by something sacred. Then, I was alone. I don't know how long I stood there. Could have been minutes. Couldn't have been an hour. I just stood with my fingers curled around nothing, my breath fogging the still air like a ghost still trying to speak. Eventually, I went back inside. The fire was cold. I didn't bother relighting it. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall and my knees pulled in close, and that's when I saw it, on the far side of the cabin near the window. A streak of brown across the wall. Mud, damp, fresh. I walked over slowly. The closer I got, the more I understood. It wasn't just a smear. It was deliberate. A shape, 2 figures. One tall, wide-shouldered, with long arms and rounded back. One smaller, upright hand extended. One smaller, upright hand extended. They stood beneath a half-circle, a sun. Rays streaking out like a child would draw them. The figures were touching, not with force, not with fear, but together. Like equals, I raised my hand and pressed it beside the drawing, not to erase it, just to remember the size of it, the feel of the mud still tacky beneath my skin. Proof he was real, that this happened, that I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't dreamed all of it in a haze of fever and grief and guilt. Later that night, I opened my old field journal, the one I'd stopped writing in after the fire, the one that still smelled like pine resin and gun oil. I turned to a blank page, uncapped the pen, and wrote, "Some eyes don't need a voice to speak. Some bonds don't need a name to exist." He walked away, but something stayed with me, something that now looks back from the trees. And when I looked up again, I could swear the woods outside were breathing. Some stories aren't meant to be tied up with a neat bow. They live in the quiet moments after the final word, like the stillness of a forest long after footsteps fade, or the hush between heartbeats when nothing moves, yet everything feels different. These stories stay with us not because of how they end, but because of how they change us. At its core, this wasn't a story about monsters. It wasn't about fear, or even survival, not really. It was about what happens when we choose compassion over control. When we meet the unknown, not with judgment, but with a willingness to see. And maybe more than anything, it was about connection. raw, fragile, and real, between two souls who should have never crossed paths, but somehow did. In a world that often teaches us to build walls, protect ourselves, and distrust what we don't understand, there's something radical about kindness. Something defiant about empathy. The kind that requires no words. The kind that reaches across fear and silence and says, "You're not alone." Sometimes healing doesn't come in the form of answers. Sometimes it's found in the wreckage, in what's left behind after the fire burns through. It's found in the broken places we thought could never hold beauty again. But they do. They always can. Because the wild things in this world, the misunderstood, the hunted, the hidden, they're not always what we think. And sometimes, if we're brave enough to look closely, we'll realize they were never the danger at all. The real threat is our own blindness, our refusal to listen, our hunger to dominate instead of coexist. But when we choose to witness instead of judge, when we choose to sit in silence instead of fill it, when we offer our hand, even if it trembles, that's where something new begins, something sacred, something human. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you feel seen, or made you see differently, then it's done what stories are meant to do. Not to instruct, not to entertain, but to awaken, to open a door, to leave a mark. Thank you for walking this path with me, through the shadows, the mist, the quiet heartbreak, and the unexpected grace. If this journey meant something to you, I'd love to hear what stayed with you. Leave a comment, share your thoughts, and if you haven't already, feel free to follow, subscribe, and be a part of this space where stories still matter, where the wild still whispers, and where sometimes what we find in the dark is light. I'll see you in the next one.